The committee will come to order. At the Oversight Committee, we exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers, because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. We work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the Federal bureaucracy. This is our mission, and this is what we are here for today. The way in which TSA has managed aviation security in our nation's airports raises numerous questions and concerns regarding the stewardship of taxpayer dollars. Although a new organization, you are not so new that you shouldn't have gotten better by now. Too many Americans, instead of delivering effective security, believe that TSA has given Americans public, long lines and policies that hardly make us safer. This is not to say that the 65,000 employees, particularly those at the front lines who often find people frustrated when they get to the head of the line, are to blame. Organizations are not based on whether their workers are good or bad. They are based on whether, in fact, their leadership is good or bad. As we look at the Transportation Logistics Center in Dallas, we find a flaw that is easy to poke holes into. But as we look at the 4,000 out of 65,000 TSA people who are here in Washington making up rules, overseeing the logistics, and in fact making many of the mistakes that have been noted in the past by both our committee and the Transportation Committee, we realize that there is a problem, and the problem for our purposes will primarily be seen as a failure to get organized in Washington. Do I believe that TSA could do more with less? Yes. But as we look at various new technologies that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and we find them sitting not in the field, but in fact in storage. In many cases, our audits show, through Chairman Mica and my staff, that in fact assets are brought back and languish there for a long period of time until congressional investigators show up. And then after a week's delay and a few more hours' delay, they have been swept away. That is exactly what you cannot do in an America that depends on your Inspector General and your Congress to have transparent ability to fairly evaluate needs for improvement. I served in the military a generation ago. The name Inspector General meant a great deal. Often people would say we have to get ready for the IG's inspection. That meant training and preparation to pass a test. It did not mean shoving things away, hiding them, or making up new schedules of what it would be on a certain day. I remain concerned that since the TSA's creation in 2001, and as its workforce has grown from an initial 16,500 authorized with 25,000 as its intended cap, that the 65,000 people working for TSA today represents too many people for too little protection. Part of this is because of the failure to launch effectively new technologies. I, for one, at the center of the dais, was here in 2001. I participated in the vote to create the TSA, and I participated in many, many votes that spent a great deal of money. Literally, one could say we threw money at the problem. It wasn't Republicans. It wasn't Democrats. It was a nation that was concerned in a post-9/11 era that we had to act quickly. We were more interested in effectiveness than efficiency. But we are a decade later. Today we are looking at both efficiency and effectiveness, and we find both lacking at the TSA. The idea that you get a good deal by buying more machinery that simply decays or becomes obsolete during its presence in Dallas makes no sense. Additionally, as a manufacturer, I am well aware that if you want to take take possession of assets, it is much, much less expensive on these large pieces of equipment to take possession at the factory and have them drop shipped when needed. So logistically there were failures, oversight there was cover-up, and in fact a decade after the creation of TSA, we are here today to question whether or not the management is maximizing the hard work of the men and women of the TSA for the benefit of the American people. That's what we're here today. This is the fourth in a series and an unparalleled joint effort by this committee and the Transportation Committee. I hope you have answers for the many questions today, and I hope this will serve as a reminder that, in fact, we will not give up on Republican or Democratic side. We will not give up until, in fact, TSA delivers a higher value for the American people. And with that, I recognize the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this week, the CIA reportedly thwarted an effort by an al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen to blow up an airliner headed for the United States using a new version of an underwear bomb. If these reports are accurate, they are yet another testament to the superb work of our intelligence and military officials and our entire nation's ongoing vigilance against terrorism. This conspiracy also underscores the real threats that are still directed against our nation. We are engaged in an ongoing battle to stay one step ahead of the terrorists. Just because Osama bin Laden has been killed and al-Qaeda leadership has been degraded does not mean we can rest. As today's hearing highlights, part of our core defenses include efforts by TSA to procure and deploy effective security technology and equipment in our nation's airports. In recent years, however, the DHS Inspector General and GAO have documented shortcomings in TSA's acquisition process and in individual procurements. In 2006, for example, TSA deployed explosives trace portals, commonly known as puffers, even though initial tests suggested they might not perform in airports as they had in laboratory settings. TSA later ended the program and scrapped the machines when they failed to perform adequately in the field. Similarly, after the attempted bombing of a Northwest Airlines flight on Christmas Day 2009, another passenger screening technology was rapidly deployed, the advanced imaging technology. GAO raised concerns about the testing and performance of these machines before they were deployed, and GAO also raised concerns about their low usage after they were deployed. Finally, last month, GAO reported that TSA's checked baggage screening program has never had a Department-approved acquisition program baseline. This program, which was initiated 8 years ago, has cost an estimated $49 billion through 2030. According to GAO, the program has already experienced cost increases, but the absence of an approved baseline makes it difficult to measure those increases against specific benchmarks. TSA's procurement challenges are similar to those of other agencies. For example, during my tenure as chairman of the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation, I convened a series of hearings to examine the Coast Guard's major procurements, including what was then known as the Deep Water Program. Early in this program, the Coast Guard spent millions of dollars buying boats that literally did not float. Based on our detailed oversight work over many months, I authored legislation to ensure that specific and detailed statutes would guide Coast Guard procurements in the future. I'm proud to say that this legislation eventually became Title IV of the Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2010. I believe a similar effort may be warranted here, and that we should consider applying such statutes to the entire Department of Homeland Security. In the meantime, I'm encouraged that the Department has already taken some steps to strengthen its management and oversight, starting with issuing a new acquisition guideline directive. This directive requires that each procurement follow a standardized and rigorous process, and it is intended to allow progress through acquisition phases only after clear and justifiable decisions are made at specific milestones. However, no rules will be effective unless they are followed. DHS awarded 88,000 procurement actions worth $13 billion in fiscal year 2010. And the challenges TSA has faced with its aviation security systems are a result of the agency not fully complying with DHS directives and DHS not insisting on TSA's compliance. The Department and its agencies must be accountable for their expenditures, and that process starts by ensuring that the Department and its procuring agencies follow their own rules. In a time when people are proposing even more extreme measures to address TSA's challenges, I see a very simple solution: follow the protocols that have been established. We have come a long way, and we still have a long way to go, but we now have an acquisition system in place that all DHS components should follow. With today's hearing, I look forward to understanding how and when TSA will reach this critical milestone. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. We now recognize the chairman of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, the senior member of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Mica, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Issa, Chairman Issa, and also Mr. Cummings, for agreeing to co-chair and be part of this oversight hearing with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in our efforts to make certain that the American public is safe and secure, and we have in place the very best security and transportation security system possible. The subject today is TSA effectively procuring, deploying, and storing aviation security equipment and technology? To that, I have to say, absolutely, they are not doing that. When we assumed the majority last year, we started looking at sort of the history of the acquisition of equipment during the past 4 years and what was happening with important security equipment. Now, I think each of my colleagues has alluded to the fact that aviation in this country is still at risk. In the last 48 hours, we've seen that terrorists still are targeting aviation because they know that it can destroy our economy. But the question is, what is our primary agency that's responsible for getting the latest technology and dealing with technology and spending taxpayer money on technology? What are they doing? First of all, Mr. Cummings talked about the puffers. I wanted to know, where are the puffers? I went to Atlantic City and saw the puffers. They didn't work when I went through them. I had some trace on me, went through them multiple times, and they said it was just a software glitch and it would be resolved. Instead, they went forward buying puffers. They bought puffers. They deployed puffers at great expense. And then what happened to the puffers when they found out they didn't work? They sat in warehouses. Well, we started our investigation last year, and they were still sitting in warehouses for years at great expense to the taxpayers. And when we started the investigation, they finally took the puffers, and I think it had cost us $600 apiece, correct me if I'm wrong, had the Department of Defense destroy them. So in the meantime, I want to know how much those puffers sitting there idly in that warehouse cost the taxpayers, and that fiasco cost us. Now, let's get current here. We had a whistleblower contact us at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, and said there's incredible amounts of equipment sitting in a TSA warehouse outside of Dallas, Texas. So we started looking into it, and of course TSA gave us a hard time thanks to Mr. Issa. We combined forces. We have one staffer who is with OGR, thank you, and also with our committee. So we started investigating, and sure enough, something was rotten in Denmark. And Dallas. Yeah, Denmark is very close to Dallas in this case. So here we get the whistleblower. We emailed in February, the beginning of February, that we wanted to do a site visit to Texas, and they put us off. They put us off for some time. I've got the whole, and Mr. Chairman, I want this sequence of timeline of requests and delays on the site visit. I made part of the record.
It will be part of the entire record without objection.
In February, we asked to go down there. They put us off. Finally, they asked for a delay. Then we found out, and our staff arrived there February 15th. On the 13th through the 15th, TSA was moving, we got word of 1,300 pieces of equipment. As our staff is arriving, their equipment's going out the back door to make certain congressional investigators don't see what's there. And what was there is equipment that had been sitting there for I think over a year, some of it very important to the security and safety of the people of the United States. Now, then we've got the equipment sitting there, and we find out that the equipment was bought for certain purposes and very good purposes. But TIA and some of that dealt with screening baggage and liquids. I won't get into all the details, and was supposed to have certain performance standards. Then we find out that the equipment's there and TSA can't deploy the equipment. These are pictures of this equipment. Here the country is at risk. The United States is under threat, and highly technical equipment that is purchased, they don't know how to operate it, and they're storing it at great public expense, is sitting in these warehouses. 5,700 pieces of equipment were sitting there. So I think this is outrageous when, again, we're depending on this agency to protect us, not to be storing equipment, buying it, not meeting the specifications, not able to operate the equipment. We'll hear some from our witnesses today in more detail about this outrage. So thank you for holding this hearing. We need to get to the bottom of why TSA is dancing this committee, our joint committees around, and not providing taxpayers with good return for their dollars and security for the traveling public. So I yield back.
I thank the Chairman. I understand the Chairman of the subcommittee will be submitting his for the record. Is that correct? Without objection, all members will have 7 days to submit opening statements and related material for the record. At this time, I'd like to recognize our distinguished panel of witnesses. Mr. David R. Nicholson is Assistant Administrator for Finance and Administration and Chief Financial Officer at the Transportation Safety Administration. Mr. Charles K. Edwards, very important returning witness, is Acting Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security, and Mr. Stephen M. Lord is Director of Homeland Security and Justice Issues at the United States Government Accountability Office, a part of this branch of government. Pursuant to our rules, all witnesses are to be sworn. Would you please rise to take the oath and raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record indicate that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to have time for discussion, and knowing that in about 20 or 25 minutes we'll have our first round of votes, I would ask that you try to summarize your statements to the 5 minutes. Your entire opening statements will be placed in the record. With that, I recognize Mr. Nicholson for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Issa, Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As intended in the Aviation Transportation Security Act, TSA remains vigilant in ensuring the security of people and commerce flowing through our transportation networks. The nature of our counterterrorism work has driven changes. TSA employs risk-based, intelligence-driven operations to prevent terrorist attacks and to reduce the vulnerability of the nation's transportation system to terrorism and provide the most effective security in the most efficient manner. We continue to evolve our security approach by examining procedures and technologies we use and how screening is conducted. Today, TSA conducts security operations at about 450 airports divided into 6 regions, 26 Federal Air Marshal Field Office. We have a 7x24 National Operations Center and 2 vetting centers with credentialing and enrollment centers throughout the country. We have a systems integration facility and a logistics facility, a Federal Air Marshal Training Center, and our headquarters is located in Arlington, Virginia. We have over 15,000 pieces of checkpoint and baggage screening equipment at our airports. Our 37 Viper teams provide a deployable capability ready to respond to intelligence and provide the capability for protecting or restoring transportation security. In our international programs, we have 29 TSARs in 19 countries, covering 100 international governments. We also have 920 K-9 teams and law enforcement agreements with 300 local law enforcement authorities. To meet our transportation security responsibilities requires flexibility in involving our personnel capabilities, processes, and employment of technology to screen about 1.7 million passengers and their property each day. You have heard about our risk-based security initiatives like TSA PreCheck, which has screened over 1 million passengers, and new procedures for screening children and people over 75. To meet our security requirements, TSA must be able to rapidly deploy technology in response to changing threat information, or have equipment ready to deploy when airport facilities are changed to accommodate the equipment. Approximately 85% of our screening equipment is being used in the field, and 15% is in warehouse, either for deployment, redeployment, or scheduled for disposal. After security equipment is successfully clears a multifaceted testing regime, TSA fulfills several requirements prior to its use in an airport setting. These requirements include developing estimates of how much equipment is needed and building a schedule for deploying individual pieces of equipment at airports around the country. Coupled with the manufacturing schedules and companies that produce our equipment, TSA typically procures equipment ahead of scheduled deployments so that it is immediately available when the airport is ready to receive it. Preparedness includes facilities preparation and a trained workforce at the appropriate staffing level. To store transportation security equipment prior to deployment, redeployment, or disposal, TSA leases 3 warehouses in Texas. Nearly 80% of the screening equipment procured by TSA has been stored in warehouses for less than a year. The reported gross value of the equipment, of our security equipment as of March 31st is approximately $155 million in the warehouse, or 5% of the value of all of our security equipment. In the past 2 years, by working directly with warehouse owners and awarding a warehouse operations contract to a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, we have reduced our cost to $3.1 million annually, or 2% of the value of the equipment just located in the warehouse. In a report published in November 2009, the DHS Inspector General reviewed TSA's management of the logistics center. TSA worked closely with the IG to quickly implement the 3 recommendations made in the report. As a result, these recommendations have been closed. Since this report closed, TSA has continued to build on those recommendations to streamline our equipment deployment, storage, and disposal. As a result of these efforts, TSA is planning to close one of the 3 warehouses within the next year. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
Good afternoon, Chairman Issa, Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Transportation Security Administration's procurement, deployment, and storage of airport security-related equipment. My testimony today will focus on our November 2009 audit report titled, Management of Transportation Security Administration's Logistics Center, which evaluated the efficiency and effectiveness of TSA's deployment, redeployment, and disposal of transportation security-related equipment. Our audit concluded that because TSA did not have formal guidance and procedures to ensure periodic review and proper classification of inventory, it was unable to efficiently deploy, redeploy, or dispose of transportation security equipment through its logistics center. As a result, the agency had potentially lost equipment utility and did not have accurate accounting of its inventory. We learned that the equipment was sent to a warehouse, assigned a condition code, and never reviewed again to ensure its utility. TSA systems did not include an accurate inventory of items available for use, did not allow TSA management to make informed deployment, redeployment, and disposal decisions, and did not ensure TSA disposed of equipment that was no longer needed. We recommended TSA periodically review its inventory to make sure equipment is correctly classified. We also found that TSA did not always deploy new equipment efficiently or resolve deployment delays. In some instances, new equipment was stored for years before TSA personnel designated an airport to receive it. For example, 8 explosive detection systems units worth about $7 million were stored for 2 years. At the time of our audit, airports had been identified to receive 7 of the units. Additionally, 345 ETD units worth about $10.6 million had been stored for 1 to 2 years or longer. The equipment's deployment had been delayed because until that time, TSA did not have written transition plans for the units. We recommended that TSA develop, implement, and monitor procedures for the efficient deployment, redeployment, and disposal of all transportation security-related equipment through its logistics center. Our audit also revealed that TSA was not redeploying equipment effectively. TSA did not assess the condition of used equipment in a timely manner to determine whether to redeploy or dispose of units. For example, as of January 2009, used equipment, including conveyors worth about $4 million, had been stored at the logistics centers for 1 to 2 years or longer. Finally, TSA did not efficiently dispose of excess equipment because the agency did not have consistent guidance for disposal. Although TSA began developing a disposal plan in May 2005, the first actual disposal did not take place until late 2008. The delay was due to difficulty in establishing an agreement with a government entity that could properly destroy sensitive national security equipment and review hazardous material disposal requirements. The space required to store the growing inventory of new, used, and excess equipment contributed to TSA's decision in fiscal year 2009 to lease an additional warehouse at a cost of $2 million. We recommended the agency develop a recurring process to redeploy or dispose of any excess equipment at the logistics center. TSA concurred with all 3 of our audit recommendations and has taken corrective actions on all 3. We have closed the recommendations as implemented. In conclusion, the Office of Inspector General remains committed to identifying issues and making recommendations to assist TSA in carrying out its mission effectively and efficiently. Mrs. Chairman, this concludes my prepared statement. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome any questions from you or the members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Lord.
Good afternoon, Chairman Issa, Mike, Representative Cummings, and other distinguished members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss DHS and TSA's broader efforts to develop and field new screening technologies. This is an important issue as these technologies represent billions of dollars in life cycle costs and are an integral part of TSA's layered approach to aviation security. Today, I'd like to highlight some of the key insights gleaned from our prior work, and I summarize those as 3. First, the importance of defining clear program requirements. Secondly, overseeing and testing new technologies. And thirdly, developing reliable and accurate acquisition program baselines to help gauge progress as an acquisition unfolds. Regarding requirements, our past work has highlighted the importance of setting clear requirements at the program start. Otherwise, you run the risk of having poor program outcomes further down the path or increased costs. For example, in June 2010, we reported that over half of the 15 DHS programs reviewed initiated acquisition activities without required approval of key requirements or planning documents. Obviously, this issue is broader than TSA alone. But we also found that TSA has faced challenges related to the requirement setting process. For example, we found that TSA did not fully follow acquisition policies when acquiring advanced imaging technology, or body scanners, which resulted in DHS approving the scanners for deployment without full knowledge of their capabilities. We also reported that TSA revised requirements for its checked baggage screening systems in 2005 and again in 2010 without a clear plan that will ensure the machines were capable of meeting the new requirements. The TSA did agree with our recommendations to address these issues and has begun taking action to address them. Regarding my second point, the importance of testing, our prior work has identified several challenges related to testing which can lead to problems down the road in the acquisition process. For example, in January, we reported that TSA began deploying AIT machines before it received formal approval for how it would test the machines. Specifically, DHS approved AIT's deployment in September 2009, but did not approve the very important Testing and Evaluation Master Plan, or TEMP, until January 2010, after decision had already been made to deploy the machines. We also identified some testing issues in our report on TSA's baggage screening system. We found that TSA was trying to collect explosive data at the same time it was procuring new machines. Not to say that it couldn't be done, but it was a high-risk strategy which led to some delays in the acquisition process. Thus, we recommended that TSA collect the needed data first before starting the procurement process for new machines. Our prior work has also highlighted the importance of establishing reliable program baselines, schedules, and cost estimates. For example, as was alluded to earlier, we found that TSA's electronic baggage screening program has not had a departmental-approved acquisition program baseline since the inception of the program more than 8 years ago. And this is for one of DHS's largest acquisition programs. TSA reports that it hopes to submit an approved version in time for the next ARB meeting in July 2012. And just for the record, they have made 2 prior attempts, so it's not that they're not trying, but it didn't meet departmental level requirements. In response to our AIT report, TSA also agreed to develop an AIT roadmap or schedule to help decision makers gauge TSA's progress in meeting new performance requirements. And we think that's an important part of the process as well. In response to these and other challenges we've identified, not only at TSA but other components, DHS is taking some additional steps to strengthen the Department's acquisition processes. For example, they've established a new Office of Program Accountability and Risk Management, or PARM. This office will reportedly work with DHS leadership to assess the health of major acquisitions and investments and provide new tools to increase the information flows between the Department and the various components. In closing, our past work has highlighted the importance of adhering to DHS acquisition processes to achieve better outcomes, transparency, and accountability. And doing so will help ensure taxpayer funds are used wisely. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lord. I now ask unanimous consent that my colleague from Tennessee, Mrs. Blackburn, be allowed to participate in today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Nicholson, are you concerned with the fact that TSA's Office of Legislative Affairs may have provided inaccurate, incomplete, and potentially misleading information to Congress?
No, sir.
You're not concerned?
No, sir.
If you learned that, in fact, TSA's Office of Legislative Affairs provided inaccurate, incomplete, or potentially misleading information to Congress concerning financial management at TSA, what would you recommend that the Administrator do?
If I learned that someone purposely provided incorrect information, then I think the Administrator should hold those people accountable under our professional responsibility program.
Then I propose to you that my staff was given documents which were not accurate as to the day they were given, but in fact were a projection of what you would shove out the back door in the days before they came in. I would propose to you that we have the ability to criminally refer that as lying to Congress. So now, will you look at what was in the warehouse, investigate, and I know that the IG would be happy to help you, what was in the warehouse as of the day the information was given. And in fact, as we were delayed going in, that material was being taken out so that on the day our people went in, it would match it, but did not fairly and accurately relate to the amount of material that was there subject to our inspection and our fact-finding.
Sir, would be happy to look at those timelines and when the meeting was scheduled, how it was scheduled, what the inventory consisted of, what the dates were, and what the nuances.
Do you believe, though, that giving an inventory not of what was in the warehouse on the day it was given, but what was going to be there after over 1,000 pieces were removed, is, in fact, misleading Congress?
I don't believe that that happened.
It did happen. Your IG is shaking his head. I want you to understand, Congress was misled. Our staff was deliberately given a document that, in fact, as they delayed an ordinary appearance, by the way, not one in which we were going to count, but simply an ordinary appearance, they were given a document that deliberately was lower than the amount that was there on the day it was given, and, in fact, stuff was being shoved out. People were brought in at, I believe, 3 in the morning, so they could get, or actually 5 in the morning, so they could get it out before our people came in. Since that is, in fact, something we believe we can make a case for, will you agree here today to take action and tell us what is going to be done about it while we consider whether, in fact, it rises to the act of a criminal deception of Congress?
We'll be happy to look into this, sir.
I appreciate that. By the way, Mr. Lord, as you were going through the additional group being layered on to create communication between an already bloated group, I could only think of a GSA conference in Las Vegas, as you were saying, that perhaps adding additional layers would beg additional conferences. Mr. Nicholson, I'm going to stay with you a little bit. You gave us a lot of figures, and I appreciate that. But let me just ask you the basic question. Do you think that, in fact, you are, by buying and storing equipment well in advance, minimizing the costs of the American taxpayer, or, in fact, your procurement procedures need to be tightened up? More or less a yes or no there.
I think there's always room for improvement in our procedures, sir. I think that we've taken many steps over the last few years, and I think we have a good deployment plan and in implementing.
Could we have the picture of sort of the office stuff there's in the? Oh, nobody's standing there. If you could put the picture up of sort of the office supplies. The office supplies, two later. There, right there. Do you recognize that type of equipment?
From what I can see of it, it looks like tables and perhaps some terminals.
Well, I'm going to pose a question to you. It's a very simple one. What idiot thought that moving that kind of equipment back and forth around the country made any sense? Are you aware that the GSA and other organizations already exist to take that kind of equipment off your hand? It doesn't appear to be sensitive. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form justify moving it from San Diego or somewhere like there to Dallas. And I might suggest that you start with that. It may be a small amount of money, but the basic concept that you're going to use a central warehouse for office supplies flies in the face of an established General Service Administration system that disposes of every congressman on the dais' excesses when we have it, and that you at least limit those 700,000 feet to unique and sensitive material. Thank you. Mr. Lord, I have just one more question with my remaining time. The GAO previously reported that it was unclear whether the advanced imaging system would have discovered explosives similar to those used in the Christmas Day by the Christmas Day bomber. Just yesterday, Janet Napolitano, Secretary Napolitano, said there is a high likelihood that advanced imaging technology would have detected the new sophisticated underwear bomb used in the recent, or attempted to be used in the recent plot in Yemen. Do you agree that there is a high likelihood that advanced imaging would have caught the new bomb?
That's a very interesting question. I would have great difficulty answering that in open sessions, sir. We've done a classified report. We can answer that. We do know the answer to that question, but I'd be happy to brief you in closed session if that's
okay. We'll take that, and I'm going to predict that it's going to be no, they couldn't. But the actual answer will remain classified. With that, I recognize the ranking member for his question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Edwards, I want to go back to just a moment ago. I'm always very sensitive in this committee, or any committee, when criminal activity is alleged. And and the Chairman, and he's rightful to be upset about this situation. I'm very upset about it. But he said something that I just want to make sure we clear up. He said that you were shaking your head, and you were shaking your head. You remember when he said that just a minute ago? And it implied that you were in disagreement with Mr. Nicholson. And it was at a very critical moment that he was asking, because he was asking about criminal activity. And I was just wondering, why were you shaking your head? Now, I got to hear you, because this is important.
I'm just listening to the question, sir.
So you weren't in disagreement or what? I just want to understand.
No, I'm just.
Because the implication was that you were not believing what he was saying. That was the implication.
No, I'm just listening to the question.
All right. Well, you need to watch your head then. Effective and efficient oversight of federal acquisitions is a critical task for this committee in Congress. It is a long-term task and requires diligent review of each stage of what can be an extremely complex process. One of the most crucial steps in any procurement should be the establishment of the acquisition program baseline. According to DHS's own acquisition manual, this is essentially the contract between the Department and the procuring agency against which future performance will be measured. Mr. Lloyd has written in his testimony that program performance cannot be accurately assessed without valid baseline requirements established at the program start. I completely agree with that, Mr. Lloyd. The Coast Guard acquisition legislation I authored prohibits the Coast Guard from beginning to obtain assets under Level 1 and Level 2 acquisitions until the Coast Guard provides several things to Congress. These include the key performance parameters for acquisition, a detailed schedule, and the program baseline and acquisition unit costs. Mr. Nicholson, it is my understanding that TSA currently has 7 Level 1 acquisition programs. How many of these have Department-approved acquisition program baselines?
Sir, I believe on the
Keep your voice up. I cannot hear you.
On the acquisition program baselines, I believe that the Department has approved one and we have scheduled others.
So, but shouldn't you have those things already?
Yes, sir.
And why don't you?
The Department's program to come in to have the ARBs to establish and approve those ARBs happened well after the start of most of our programs.
Right.
Within the agency, we did hold our own ARBs. We established them, and I think the points to refresh those and have them done and affirmed or modified by the Department as part of their process.
So I understand that some of your Level 1 programs have TSA-approved acquisition baselines, but they have lacked DHS-approved baselines for more than 7 years. That's 7 years of spending without an approved acquisition plan. That's more than 4 years of spending since DHS issued its new acquisition management directive in 2008. I know that each program is unique and many predate 2008 acquisition directive, but why do so many TSA Level 1 acquisitions lack Department-approved program baselines?
We just need to get in the queue and get those approved by the Department under the new process, sir.
And that's not good enough. It's not good enough. We have to do better than that. What steps are being taken to ensure that the Department reviews and approves baselines for these programs?
We have scheduled meetings with them. We have provided the documentation to them, and they review those as part of our input into the programs and analysis that the new Office of PARM has set up to perform.
Mr. Lloyd, I understand that GAO is currently reviewing all the TSA's Level 1 acquisition programs. Can you explain why TSA has so many Level 1 procurements that have lacked program baselines, and what steps is TSA taking to ensure that the baselines can be approved by the Department? Because it sounds like this is one of them, I blame you, you blame me, and nobody gets it done.
Well, I think there's, you need to look at 2 levels. Department level, they obviously, it's a shared responsibility. They need to take ownership of some of their requirements. It's not enough, not sufficient to simply issue a new framework, but you have to monitor component adherence to it and take additional steps to share the necessary meetings, paperwork, and discussions take place. So I'm concerned about that because, again, the acquisition program baseline, that's the key document that outlines what the program is going to cost, when it's going to be fielded, and what technical performance it's going to deliver. So if you don't have that up front, how are you going to gauge progress over the length of the program?
And Mr. Lloyd, what specific steps does DHS need to take to ensure that its component agencies comply fully with its acquisition directives? And by what date will this be accomplished? Can you tell us that?
Sure. I think, first of all, they have, to their credit, they have implemented some new guidance, clarified some of the existing rules. We found there was some confusion at the TSA level about what the actual requirements were because the requirements changed. But I think they've clarified that. They've given new training. They're hiring more acquisition professionals. So it's a difficult nut to crack, but hopefully over the longer term they'll be more successful. But again, that's a key deficiency, not having a departmental approved acquisition program baseline. For your level 1, just so everybody knows, those are your major programs. Everything above, that's when the life cycle costs exceed $1 billion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We now recognize the Chairman of the Transportation Committee, Mr. Mica, for his questions.
Mr. Nicholson, have you seen this report that we published November 16th? That was the 10th anniversary of, I guess, the passage of the TSA legislation. Have you
Yes,
seen
sir.
it? You have seen it?
Yes, sir.
Are you one of the people that said that publishing this report was a disservice to TSA?
I have not heard that said.
That your communications folks, when Mr. Issa and I produced this report, said that this was a disservice to TSA. I remember it very clearly, and I wrote the administrator back, and I thought it was a disservice for him to ignore what we had outlined. In that report, we went through TSA's failing to develop and deploy effective technology. Back then, Mr. Issa, we said TSA warehouses are nearly at capacity. We were correct there, containing almost 2,800 pieces of screening equipment. Little did we know there were 5,700 pieces of screening equipment sitting there that, again, you delayed and actually diverted our investigators from going down there, moving the stuff out in the middle of the night before they arrived after delaying them. You need to go back and look at this report because it wasn't meant, it's not meant to demean TSA, but to better define the mission, to look at the gaps. And we think we did a fairly thorough job. We'll continue to take each part of this, Mr. Eisen and I, apart, and we'll send our investigators down until we somehow make some sense out of this agency. When you're procuring billions of dollars worth of equipment, it's sitting in warehouses, some of it for over a year. Listen to this. When investigators, well, first of all, the committee investigators discovered 85% of the transportation security equipment currently warehoused there has been stored for longer than 6 months. 35% of the equipment had been stored for more than a year. This is, put it up here, guys. Put it up here. First go into 2008. Here is advanced imaging technology sitting in that center since August 4th, 2008. Let's go to the next page. And this is the kind of stuff, the next page here, this is explosive detection system. I don't know exactly which one it was, but people within the last 48 hours are trying to take our lights out, and advanced explosive detection system equipment. This has been sitting there since December 12, 2010. Are you aware of this, sir?
I'm not aware of this.
You're not aware of this. Well, somebody needs to get aware. This is hundreds of millions. The advanced imaging technology was a $500 million acquisition, of which they bought equipment for which we still don't have people that are trained. We don't operate it, and the failure of the equipment. I invite everybody on this panel next week. Yesterday I was briefed in a closed-door briefing on the performance of looking at specifically, and this was scheduled before all of this came out, and we've had the General Accounting Office test the system, and Mr. Eisen and I will continue to do it. And we've seen the failures. Somebody needs to see the failures, both in acquiring equipment, deploying equipment, and making sure equipment is not sitting in a warehouse idle when people are trying to take our lights out. Don't you think that's a reasonable request, sir, that we have you act and make certain that this equipment sitting, one is what, 4 years, the other is 2 years, that it's properly deployed or something's done with it. The puffers, at least We stopped paying for the rental after years of having it in those warehouses, and they'd still be sitting there if we hadn't done something about it.
Well, sir, I can tell you, as I started to say, the EDS, I'm not sure which unit that would be and what type.
Well, I don't think it's a millimeter wave, because I don't think we had that deployed at that point. If it is, then I'll really blow my cork.
No, the EDS would be for electronic baggage. The AIT picture, given the date, would have to be a pilot from a program that we had several years ago, because we didn't make our purchase of AIT to deploy in the primary screening area until much later in time, after 2008.
Well, again, the procurement process is a disaster. We've just heard we're buying things that we haven't properly vetted. I do not think any of the advanced imaging technology was properly vetted. In fact, I know it wasn't vetted. I know we could have bought the stick equipment with the image that wasn't offensive, and now you're going back and vetting and testing the stick equipment rather than the invasive equipment that you deployed. But of course, we have an agency in which we had no administrator for over a year, and an agency that has turned out to be more dysfunctional than anyone would have anticipated. But somebody's got to get a control of this. 65,000 employees, nearly $8 billion in expenditures, 14,000 administrative staff. It's reached critical mass. And taxpayers are not going to put up with it anymore. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'd ask unanimous consent I'd be able to ask just one quick question to follow up on the ranking member without objection. Mr. Edwards, as an Inspector General, deliberately if it was done, deliberately moving equipment out and changing what was actually in the warehouse to what, and essentially rigging something for an IG inspection. If this was the military Inspector General and you take all your excess equipment, you run it somewhere so you can fit a certain requirement, isn't that normally something for which there is disciplinary action if an IG discovers that essentially things have been moved out in anticipation of an IG's inspection or anyone's inspection?
Well, if an allegation or if something is brought to our attention and it's perceived to be in that nature, then we'll definitely do our administrative investigation and then refer it to management for appropriate.
Thank you. I appreciate your indulgence. We now go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before I begin, before my clock begins, could I just inquire of you?
Of course.
Was this panel sworn in? I can't.
Yes, they were.
I thank the Chair. Mr. Nicholson, you're under oath. In response to the Chairman's question, did I understand you to deny any and all awareness of the fact that equipment may have been moved in the warehouses in question in order to conceal information from congressional staff or Congress itself?
Sir, you understood me to say that I have no information that that was done?
Are you aware of the fact it was done?
I don't believe it was done.
So your position is?
My position is that we have disposals that happen at our warehouse in the 3 to 5 month range each year. Those disposals take place, and the email traffic that I think will be part of the record will show that this disposal schedule was started in the first quarter of FY11. There were several back and forth scheduled for it. The disposal was scheduled to take place the 13th through the 17th of February, and the disposal took place as it was scheduled to do. It was scheduled, and it was attempted to be scheduled several months before.
So if congressional staff happened to be visiting the facility and it was coincident with that scheduled moving out of equipment, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think the letter that we received from the committee that was signed on the 6th of February suggested dates of 14 or 15 February, and the response that we gave was 15 February would be fine.
And Mr. Edwards, nothing came to your attention in the IG's office with respect to this matter?
No, sir. Nothing came to our attention.
So this is news to you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholson, at our previous hearing on TSA, we cited the abysmal record of turnover at TSA, and one of the reasons attributed to it was that the Partnership for Public Services Best Places to Work survey, which surveys 241 Federal agencies and entities, TSA ranked 232nd out of 241. Mr. Chairman, maybe we should hold hearings on the other 9 someday to find out just how bad things can get.
What does it take to get to the very
Exactly.
bottom?
What's it take? A, to what do you attribute such incredible turnover? Because one looks at working conditions, one looks at management, one looks at compensation. But part 2 of my question, and I'd like Mr. Lord to comment on this as well, we can't, especially in light of the recent announcement of yet another permutation on a terrorist attempt to take down an airplane, we know that we can't simply rely on technology. We need trained eyes and trained minds to recognize something looks funny. And shrewd judgment needs to be exercised in order to protect the public on occasion. I am deeply concerned, as I know you must be, that given the turnover and the low morale, that's got to impinge on that key set of skills we need deployed on behalf of American security.
Sir, I can give you a couple of comments on that with respect to our transportation security officer workforce. I think, I don't have the exact numbers, but I seem to recall it's somewhere above 60% of our people have served over 5 years in the agency. So we have good retention of a core group of people. Our attrition rate that we have today, I think, is about 7%. So there's marked change in attrition over the year. And in the surveys do show some of the things that you mentioned with respect to where TSO started. We do know that the year before TSO was stood up that the industry was reporting over 100% turnover. So they hired essentially 2 people for the same job every year. So we've made significant progress in that. But we do get overwhelming responses with belief in the nature of work and dedicated to the mission. So I think the focus of our people on the front line, to your point, are people focused on security and protecting the American public. I think the surveys have borne that out, at least in the minds of our transportation security officers.
Mr. Lord?
I just want to point out we have ongoing work looking at DHS morale issues. I would argue that it's an issue that cuts across the entire department. I'm not here. I don't have any unique insights offered today, but because our work is not completed. But in general, TSA, they have a difficult task. They're screening 1.7 million passengers per day. Some passengers are in a hurry. Some are grumpy. It's a challenge in some cases.
Conceding it's a challenge, Mr. Lord, but the question is, given relatively low morale by any measurement and historic high turnover, although improvements have been made, is there reason to believe, from your professional perspective, that that could impinge on the ability of the agency, through its personnel, to sort of stay attuned to the human factor as opposed to relying on machines to catch it?
I think you need a dedicated, alert workforce, given the issues you're dealing with. But again, I'm not sure what the root causes are, and we have a team looking at that. It's not being led by me, I should add. It's being led by another GO executive. So,
thank you, Madam Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. The Chair now yields 5 minutes to Mr. Chafez from Utah.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholson, the current inventory that TSA has is somewhere between $185 million and $200 million. Is that correct?
The inventory in the warehouse, sir, as of the 31st of March was about $155 million. And it's dropped since as of the end of April. I don't have it exact. I think it's
the inventory sheet that you gave the United States Congress. Why did that not account for things that were in the disposal process?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the sheet, so I'm not sure what you have.
For the CFO, you're having a hearing about this topic. You're telling me you haven't seen the inventory sheets?
No, sir, I don't normally look at the inventory sheets for our warehouse on a month-to-month basis. I have macro indicators.
Who would look at that? You're the CFO of the TSA. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't look at that?
The person who looks at who oversees the warehouse has the inventory sheet. I get a monthly printout as part of our financial statement as what the
maybe we're getting to the heart of the problem, is that with thousands of administrators along the way, we would expect somebody at your level And certainly, if we're having a hearing about this, we would expect the TSA to provide that type of person. Let me ask you another question. How many bomb-sniffing dogs do you have in inventory? I mean, in a warehouse. How many extra ones do you have?
We have no canines in the warehouse, sir.
And so you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on whole-body imaging machines. They cost about $175,000 a piece. Dogs fully trained are about $30,000. How many of these whole-body imaging types of machines have you been requested to provide to either the White House, Iraq, or Afghanistan?
Sir, first I'd like to say the amount of money that we've spent for technology for all of the AITs, including the 200 that we just purchased about 2 weeks ago, is about $159 million.
So this most recent purchase was how many dollars?
$30 million, sir.
$30 million. And you still have some in inventory. We don't know that they necessarily work. Let me ask you, if we were to take an improvised explosive device and strap it to your groin area, and you didn't want it to be detected, would you much rather walk by a bomb-sniffing, say, German Shepherd or through a whole-body imaging machine?
I would not want to walk past either that were, especially if the canine team was properly certified.
I find it fascinating that only the TSA seems enthralled with these machines. You know, I go visit the White House. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan. I've never seen a whole-body imaging machines at some of the places we need the highest level of security. But I do routinely see dogs, bomb-sniffing dogs. When we have the State of the Union, arguably one of the most secure events that this nation has, they don't bring in whole-body imaging machines. They bring in dogs. And what frustrates me about the TSA is that we know, based on what was done at the Pentagon, when they stood up JIDO, Joint Improvised Explosive Device Defeat Organization, we put a general in charge of it. They spent $19 billion figuring out how to find these improvised explosive devices, and their conclusion was the single best way to find a bomb is through a dog, a bomb-sniffing dog. And this TSA and this administration continues to deny the opportunity to secure these airports to the most full extent that they can by purchasing these machines that we have questions about whether or not they even work. The threat from terrorism is real. We're not messing around. People want to kill us. And people are going to die if we continue to play games, put hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment in warehouses not to be used. We don't even know what that inventory is. And we refuse to invest in dogs and canines that are mobile. They can detect things from everything from the parking lot right up to the gate and on the airplane themselves. It's what the Israelis do. It's what the Pentagon does. It's what the White House does. It's what we do in the United States Congress. And yet only the TSA decides that whole-body imaging machines are better, and then we stick hundreds of millions of dollars of them in the warehouse. People are going to die if we continue to make these asinine decisions. And it's so frustrating to see what's happening and then to get basically a document that's totally inaccurate presented to the United States Congress to try to cover this up. And while we got thousands of administrators out there, we shouldn't be investing in more administration and opening up a new office so we can communicate better. Go get the dogs. That's how we're going to secure these airplanes and thwart these terrorists that want to try to kill us. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you. Just one question about the newly acquired automated AIT. What are you doing about the false alarm problem?
Sir, we're looking at the false alarm problem to make sure it fits within our standards. And right now, it does fit within our standards. What we're concerned about is, as we make the improvements to the technology and
I wonder what that standard is. What percent false alarms do you allow? I tell you, I conducted a little experiment just for fun. Wore identical clothes through San Diego last Friday and Eugene, Oregon on Monday. Identical, absolutely identical. I took the underwear home and washed it. So nothing changed, okay? I went through the remote operator body scanner in San Diego, and since I know what not to wear, no problem. Go right through. Eugene, for the 4th week in a row with the brand new technology, I have to get patted down. Identical clothing. And then I stood there and watched, and of the next 15 people who went through that machine, 12 had to be patted down. Now, doesn't that seem like a pretty high false alarm rate, because they were all false alarms?
Yes, sir. I'd have to check into that. I don't know the exact answer to your question.
Well, okay, and I did talk to the regional administrator, and he admits that they have a little problem with the software. There is new software being developed because it can't deal with clothing. Like if you're wearing pants that are a little heavier than normal, like jeans, alarm. Wearing socks and pants, oh, alarm, because he has socks and pants on. Wearing a collar, alarm. I mean, the idea, because we're so uptight in this country that we couldn't look at the fuzzy, black and white images of bodies and have something that perhaps is more effective and false alarms less. We've now gone to this dumbed-down machine or, hastily acquired machine, which apparently, at least from my observation, false alarms a tremendous amount of the time, which is going to lead to basically, I believe as, you get a lot of false alarms after a while, it's like, oh, this thing false alarms all the time. Then I think the screeners are going to lose their attentiveness to finding a real threat.
Yes, sir. I hope that your experience is not shared, and I'll be happy to take that up and look at.
Well, I'm told that it does have a problem. They are developing new software, but the question would be, why did we deploy them and we're using them as standalones with this problem? Because my observation is you're actually requiring more personnel because you have so many false alarms, as opposed to saying, well, we don't have to have a remote operator anymore. And it seems to me an acquisition problem. I mean, we should have had people wearing different thicknesses of clothing testing these things and had some sort of parameter on how many false alarms we would tolerate. So I think it's on the inventory here. There's the advanced technology AT2s, 472 of them. Now, why would they be sitting in the? Does every airport in America now have AT2s for carry-on bags?
No, sir, they don't. I'm not sure of the date of the inventory. I don't have the report available.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the report the Republicans provide. But if there were 472 sitting there, I mean, basically this is pretty much a simple replacement, doesn't require much reconfiguration of the airport, and they're much better technology, and they have faster throughput, and they're more accurate. I mean, we really shouldn't have 472 of them sitting in inventory, should we?
Sir, we have 157.
Okay.
We have 157 in inventory, and about 23 of those are in our safety stock. So at least 23 will remain in inventory unless we have a problem. We've had a deployment plan that we've set out. The deployment plan called for us to continue to outfit the entire nation. By the end of this fiscal year, we're about 3 months ahead of that plan, and we'll have deployed AIT by July of this year.
All right. And then on the EDSs, 54, according, again, to this inventory, 54. These would be baggage screening EDSs. And again, why would we have 54?
It could be a variety of reasons, sir. It could be because that some are safety stock. A small number of those will be safety stock. The other reason is that we're doing facilities modifications at some airports to put inline systems in. That facilities work normally takes about a year, depending upon the size of the project. We buy the stock to put in so that when the facilities work is ready, we can deploy the units and make the system complete.
Right. But we have airports that don't have any EDS. We have 54 in stock, and we keep a large number in stock so that when someone finishes their inline system sometime in the next 12 months, we'll have machines there to go. I mean, what happened to like just-in-time delivery? I mean, why couldn't we just have the machines delivered to that airport when their new inline system is complete?
That's what we try to do, sir. We use 6 regional managers, and that's the job that they try to serve, to work with the airports to have those ready and available and sequence them in for the installation. That's the same approach we take for the checkpoint technology.
Okay. And then finally, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to go over for a moment. On when you go to an inline system and you had the standalone units, what do you do with those standalone units?
The standalone units depending upon what happens, you'll retire some of those. So if you have standalone units and they're replaced by the inline system, which is often the case, those get eliminated. And sometimes
eliminated. I mean, what if you have airports that don't have any EDS? Why couldn't you take a still functioning machine and move it there?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what we do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I yield 5 minutes to myself on it. Let me pick up on what Mr. DeFazio was just talking about, Mr. Nicholson. Just-in-time delivery. I know very few businesses in my district that don't do just-in-time delivery, and that they also will order it, purchase it, and then it's delivered from the factory. Are these pieces of equipment inspected after they arrive and calibrated after they arrive at the airport?
Yes, sir. There's a couple of things on that. Depending upon the technology, there's a different inspection regimen. For example, the EDS that we were just talking about and the AT and AIT, there's normally an inspection that takes place at the factory before we go. It's called factory acceptance test, and then we do a site acceptance test. So
are you also inspecting it when it comes to the warehouse?
When it comes back to the warehouse, we have a
So I'm saying when it leaves the factory, it's inspected before it leaves the factory. When it gets to the warehouse, is it inspected again?
No, not until a site acceptance. The manufacturer has the warranty on that when they pick it up and for the site acceptance.
So is there a reason that it can't be just delivered from the factory to the airport when it's ready?
Well, in our earlier discussion on AIT, just to make sure we have the record straight on AIT, the inventory level of the warehouse for AIT that we have, I think, is 2 right now.
But we're talking about for all the other pieces of equipment, some that have been there 6, 9 months, a year, and you're saying, yes, that the airport's getting ready in the next year, so you know when it's coming.
Right.
Obviously, there's a long lead-up time. There's plenty of time to contact the manufacturer and say, we need one of these 9 months from now dropped and ready to go. You take the 9 months preparing the airport, and then it's delivered out.
Right. And the other situation you'll have with equipment that we buy for the airport is, if you take a look at our explosive trace detection equipment, for example, we have about 8,000 units. Those are split between checked baggage resolution and carry-on baggage resolution. The life expectancy of those units, or the service life, if you will, is about 7 years. So you're replacing, almost 1,000 or more every year. So
is that 7 years from the time it hits your warehouse, or from the time it hits the airport?
7 years from the time it hits the airport. So if we're going to buy those, we wouldn't buy them in small lots. We usually buy them to get an economic quantity discount.
I understand, but typical manufacturing procurement, you may buy them multiple, but it's part of your agreement with them that they hold them at the factory, and that you're going to need 18. They've got them, they manufacture them, they hold them there, then they ship them out just in time. I mean, that's a typical agreement.
It depends upon how we structure our agreement with manufacturers, sir.
Okay. Well, let me just make a couple comments on it. One is, I've met some great people that work for TSA. I have no criticism of some of the folks there, but it's an incredibly chaotic environment that you walk through. Yelling, lots of long lines in there, not long lines because of efficiency, but it's yelling because somebody's yelling bag check over here, and it takes 4 or 5 minutes for someone to wander over and check it. Then I'm hearing bag check over there multiple times and hollering back and forth, and you see this frustrated group of passengers there. I also see policies that are implemented that even the TSA workers themselves don't understand why they have to do this. And it's especially frustrating to me when I interact with constituents, senior adult ladies with a knee replacement that are getting pat-downs on it that are absolutely humiliating to them in the process. Now, I know we've had some discussion on what to do with children and now people over 75, but this humiliating process of going through the pat-down seems to be very unique to what's happening in our airports. Can we document a single moment that a pat-down has discovered a threat?
I think the answer to that is yes, sir. I don't have the specifics. I know we find weapons sometimes through pat-downs. We find several prohibited items that we do through pat-downs. We find several items that are concealed on people that may or may not be the instrument of terrorism, but they're the instrument of something that is illicit.
Not just find something, not just a bottle of shampoo or something. But
yes,
Mr. Lord, you look like you were leaning forward. Do you have a response to that as well?
No, I don't. Sorry to suggest I did.
This goes back to.
I can give, for example, we found people with tens of credit cards and false IDs taped to their body. We find folks with tens of thousands of dollars taped to their body and attempted to be concealed on their body. We find weapons that are strapped to a body or...
Are you talking about in a pat-down or in...
sometimes in a pat-down and a resolution if it shows up as an anomaly.
Right. Yeah. The issue comes back to what I mentioned before was the senior adult lady with the knee replacement, that if they come to the Capitol and it sets off the metal detector, we have a wand. If you come to the airport, she's going to get patted down. And that is not just a lot of fun for anyone. I've had multiple times, Mr. Fazio was talking about before as well, of having multiple times of being patted down as I go through security. That is humiliating for a senior adult to go through that. And I know of people that I've talked to that have said they've just stopped flying. So this is not only just, this is beyond just a safety issue. This is a commercial enterprise and the free movement of people around the United States. There is a unique balance that has to be abided by, where some of this equipment helps us in that. As Mr. Chaffetz had mentioned before, dogs can help us with that. But in moments that we can get things out of the warehouse into the placement and go through a process where we're not having to humiliate people as they go through, we need to strive to achieve that.
Sir, that's exactly the direction that you set it very close to how our administrator presents it. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take a risk-based approach to this and modify our procedures and phase those in.
Right. I understand, because I obviously fly often as well, and I watch the procedures changing consistently over time. And it seems to be this constant experiment that's going on. But it is a constant sense of frustration that's also happening in the process as well. We are approaching a time for votes. So they've already getting very close to the time it's got to end. I'd like to put us in recess for a moment until these votes conclude, and then we'll call us back in session after that. With that, we'll recess until after votes are concluded.